you for being with us here today. We're here with AB3 Medical, and I'm called Kate. I'm Business Development Manager for AB3 Medical, and I'll let these two introduce themselves. Ronnie, if you want to start first.
Yeah, so my name's Dr. Ryan Banerjee. I am a GP and a sports doctor, so I work in professional football with Hull City in the English League. I work in rugby and I work for GB Taekwondo and work as a private care doctor as well.
I'm Alisa McHenry. I'm a solicitor and head of sport at a law firm in the UK. I'm here really because I wrote the chapter on football injuries in the sports law textbook, Football and the Law, both the first edition and the second edition. I've got 15 years worth of experience in sports litigation, and I'm also on the panel for sports resolution, so I'll often make decisions in sports litigation cases, one of which we'll discuss in a bit more detail today.
Thank you, Beth. And so I just want to kind of ask you guys a question. So have a think whether you guys know where all of your medical information is. The average person, like me, I know that all my medical information is with my GP, and I haven't moved around much, so I know where to access all of my information. However, it's a little bit different. When you're an athlete and you move from club to club, you could have 6, 7, 8 clubs within your sporting career, and a lot of athletes aren't registered with a GP. So if you think about that, a lot of information needs to be transferred from club to club. And after some extensive research from Dr. Banerjee, it's come to apparent that a lot of information is lost along the way, and that can be detrimental to the player, and it can also have a lot of implications for the clinician as well. So we're just going to do a quick, short introduction video so you can see a little bit more about what AB3 Medical is.
AB3 empowers the athlete,
merges the records,
and revolutionises the care in sport.
It's an integrated athlete passport app, so it's there to help manage injuries and illness better and have huge kind of implications financially and time-wise for all the stakeholders involved in someone's care. They can show any clinician all the right medical information straight away, whatever the club, wherever the country, wherever the healthcare sector.
We've got to make sure that our players are best looked after, because ultimately they're the biggest commodity, they're the product that we're selling.
A championship outfit, you'd expect that they would have known the full history themselves at early stages of bowel cancer. All this could have been prevented if we'd have known the information sooner.
It doesn't look after the player, it leaves the clinician and the medical team at significant risk, because what you don't know you can't help.
It's like buying a really bad second-hand car, you just won't do it, so that service history is really important to have.
If I arrive in A&E today and I'm unconscious for whatever reason, they have no idea whatsoever of what injuries have occurred, what tests I've had.
Even simple things like knowing what drug allergies that player might have, they might not have access to, which is quite scary.
Their healthcare record isn't passed on to the general practitioners.
It's a passport to get the best care.
Well, that A&E consultant who sees the player who's got a broken leg can input directly onto the app, and that can be available on the dashboard for me straight away. And that's something that's unique.
So there are a whole host of different tools on there that allows players to have some control.
What I really like about AB3 is it just flips the model on its head.
I think it's really warming to know that he won't have the same issues and problems that many current past players, athletes, sports people around the world face daily, because they don't have all the information, and I think information is king.
To AB3 Medical, and it was created because of a huge case that Ronnie had to deal with, which was with Angus McDonald, who played for Hull City. And Angus was under Dr. Banerjee's care. And would you like to just delve into a bit more about that case?
Yeah, sure. So I joined in September 2018, and Angus joined on transfer deadline day in January 2018. So he was alongside a few other players who joined on that day. So we do quite an extensive, or my predecessors did quite an extensive medical, so they will be doing full body MRIs, scans, they were doing heart scans, they were doing blood tests. Some of the things were coming back before the transfer had to be announced. Some of the things were not coming back beforehand. So they've made their risk assessment, and then they need to decide what they're doing next. So they signed Angus, and then fast forward, when I joined in September, a week after I joined, a 26-year-old player developed a blood clot in their leg. And for me, it immediately raised kind of question marks. What is going on here? There's clearly something else going on, something more sinister going on. So I started investigating that, so doing scans from head to toe, blood tests, and I joined Angus to my GP practice, my family doctor practice at that point, and I was doing other tests there, and I could see that he'd had previous tests done from the previous club, which were not on their normal system. So it never got passed through to our medical team or my predecessors. So there was blood tests and other things which were done, and if my predecessors had that information, it might have made their risk assessment of the medical different, but more importantly, Angus wouldn't have spent 6 months of potentially having a blood clot in his leg, blood clots in his lungs, colitis which was left untreated, and really things which were avoidable and could have ended up causing something really fatal. So, kind of long story short, we've then ended up treating him. He's then ended up having surgery for his colitis, unfortunately developed bowel cancer, and then he made a miraculous kind of recovery back, and he was playing towards the end of his contract with us, moved on to play in elite football from here on in. So he's a success story. One of the things which I'm sure Alisa will want to touch on was Angus's, it was a landmark legal case because there was a non-medical disclosure thing in the warranty, and obviously that medical information didn't get passed on. So that led to a $1 million settlement case between Hull and the previous club, Barnsley. And yeah.
Yeah. Alisa, from a sports lawyer perspective, what's your thoughts on that case?
Thanks, Kate. I mean, it's a fascinating. I wasn't involved in the case at the time, but I've read the written reasons. The written reasons extend to nearly 100 pages. So this was a seriously complex case that had 3 of the leading arbitrators deciding the case in the sports field. We had big hitting barristers on either side, KCs, well-known KCs in the sports field, both acting for Hull and for Barnsley. So on any analysis, this was a very high value, very important and very complex case. What was interesting having worked in sports litigation for 15 years, a lot of decisions do not get published. A lot of written reasons do not make their way into the public domain. So what was interesting for me was that this was disclosed almost in its entirety. There were certain sections pertaining to the player's certain parts of the player's medical record which were redacted, but you can just go online and read these written reasons. I think, amazingly, from a kind of disclosure perspective and a witness perspective, we had 3 witnesses on each side who are all medically qualified, and then on top of that, an expert witness in a medically qualified expert witness, on either side as well. So you've got 8 medically qualified witnesses being cross-examined in the course of a 4-day trial. Now that is almost unheard of. It's a really high amount of medical personnel. It's a huge amount of time and expense. And frankly, I think most lawyers, and speaking from someone who's decided some of these types of cases, you don't want medically qualified practitioners in court. You don't want them involved in litigation. You don't want them involved in proceedings. You want them looking after the athletes, which is what people like Ronnie trained for, and what their vocation is. Litigation. I'm a litigation lawyer, but I would never recommend anyone to be involved in litigation. It's not easy, and particularly if you're a witness, then you're likely going to come up against some difficult cross-examination, and it's stressful, and it's time-consuming, and it's not a good use of resources. So all of that could have been avoided, or at least mitigated by Ronnie's app, by the Medical Passport app, because there was just such a high proportion of medical evidence in play. I think the Hull City's defence, it was actually a litigation started by Barnsley for lack of payment for the transfer, but Hull's defence and counterclaim, which dwarfed Barnsley's initial claim, I think that the panel remarked somewhere in the written reasons that over half of what was a 135-page document was given over to medical evidence. Again, that is just too high a proportion, and medical evidence won't be welcomed by panels deciding that sort of stuff. They will want it to be agreed between the parties beforehand, and therefore, you know, they want to have a situation where they don't have to decide as much. They want it all distilled down into one or two discrete issues. So it's a huge amount of time and cost was put into the case, and interesting reading though it is, and interesting legally though it is, you know, it could well have been avoided.
Yeah, I think medical litigation, especially in the sporting arena, is becoming a lot more mainstream now. And like you said, a lot of cases aren't actually published, so it's just the tip of the iceberg of what we actually get to see. But what's your kind of thoughts on the importance of medical note-keeping for clubs?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely imperative, and you know, one of the biggest, as I've just said, one of the biggest kind of time hoovers up of in any litigation is to do with disclosure, and it's to do with evidence. And if there was better note keeping taken at the time, particularly of a contemporaneous nature, and in an app like this one, where everything is in one place and is effectively not up for dispute, I think that saves an awful amount of time and expense. So it's absolutely critical. I mean, it's as critical as any evidence to any case, not just in football or sport, but it's there's a huge weight placed on contemporaneous note keeping, you know, in any dispute. That it's absolutely invaluable. So in a medical context where note keeping is even more to the fore, then it's even more important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is exactly why I suppose, Ronnie, you created the app. And it's not just kind of sporting injuries, you know, in football or any other sports that you'd think, oh, hamstring tear or something like that. These are serious problems. So dementia, long-term heart injuries, or just long-term injuries in general, can you kind of like touch on the things that you'd see?
Yeah, so those are the ones which make the headlines, aren't they,
Yeah.
and what we're seeing on the screen. So whether it's concussion, mental health, dementia, you can see lawsuits which are happening with NFL stars, football. You've got cardiac ones you can see, which again hit the main kind of headlines. Behind the scenes, for me, I think you're talking about a multi-billion-pound industry, and you've got to do the basics right, whether you're talking about medicine, law, or performance. And we focus on performance aspects, which are the 1, 2, 5% to make that player better, and we're not doing the basics right. Mm-hmm. So players need to have their medical record. I need to make a fully informed decision about what I'm doing, and then I can treat that person to the best of my ability. Yeah. And if I'm doing that, then we are trying to make that player availability better for the management staff, so that as a team, obviously, we play better, and that's what it's all about. But you need that basic, you need that basic information. So after that case, that then led to me thinking, it's not just me who's obviously involved with this. If I'm in a championship club and I'm experiencing this, yes, I might not be at Premier League, but there are clubs in the Premier League where I know this would happen, and I know there are clubs in much lower leagues where this is happening. And if this is happening in England, this is happening around the world. So led me to do lots of research with all of my peers. So I got 77 doctors, sports doctors around the 92 clubs to kind of participate in a 15-point questionnaire. And the results were quite alarming, kind of reading. It was that 10 plus different note-keeping systems are in use in football alone. And when you compare that to other sports at least standardise, some of them standardise their note-keeping. So at least when you move from club to club, it's standardised. However, as we'll probably touch on later, even then, there's still lots of lost information in different silos. So 10 plus different note-keeping systems in use. The other main big findings were 49% of me do not pass on medical information of an athlete when they leave my care. And Alisa touched on it then, from note-keeping and poor handover of care. That's basic things. So whether someone's had a hamstring tear, whether someone's had a heart issue, whether someone's had concussion or mental health illness, that should be passed on with that player's consent, because we're doing a disservice to that player's medical and performance moving forwards. So the other main one was 50% of sports doctors do not know if that player is registered with a GP or a family doctor, which, how can I pass on information to a family doctor if I don't even know if they're registered with one or not? So players care, as you've seen from that initial video, they might spend 1 year, 5 years, 20 years involved with one club, 5 clubs, 10 clubs. And that is all in a private care arena. So whether it's heart screening, blood tests, or specialists they see, or the MRI scans they have on their knee, or they go from England to Japan to America to have different scans done, none of that information is collated anywhere, which goes back to multiple data silos. If you have that, it's a no-brainer that you need the information to be in one place, one record, and it has to be in the right hands. And the right hands isn't the club. All of the things which we have at the minute are club-owned, are systems which the organisation run. The player does not see that unless they ask for it. I'm sure Alisa will want to touch on it from the player data rights, but you should have access to everything. You're allowed to have access. You're allowed to have access to your NHS care, so similarly, you should have access to this. You shouldn't really have to ask for that. So if you're moving from club to club, the dream scenario is that a player has that from when they start an academy. You get put on to an app. You then carry that in your pocket as you move from club to club. While you're under my care, I write information. When you leave my care, I get taken off. New doctor gets put on it. So yeah, it has to be in the right hands.
Yeah, and from kind of that international perspective, I presume, but one of the best features that I think is great about the AB3 app is that the player owns the information, so they take it with them from when they move from club to club, and it's not just about benefiting the player, it's the clinician. It just makes your job a lot easier to do, and like you said, it's a simple solution. Like it should be being done now, and the fact that there's more than 10 different EMR systems within the sport and field, it's no wonder a lot of information is kind of being lost along the way. So yeah, what kind of things would you kind of encounter on a day-to-day basis as a GP? Like what kind of problems would come up if you aren't given that information? Does it take you longer to get, just general admin done before they join a club?
So from a GP perspective, if I'm not a sports doctor and I was a GP, I don't see any of that record. So like we said, whether it's 5 years or 20 years, I don't see any of those heart scans, blood tests. Mm-hmm. I don't see any of those MRI scans. A player, whether it then means they come during retirement to come and see me, or whether it means they see me as a second opinion, or they see me to look after their chronic disease management of things like asthma or epilepsy or diabetes, that means that the club doctor might not be seeing the things which I'm doing, and vice versa. It's all a bit of a mess there. So that led to creating that solution. So the solution is followed as a to E kind of approach we created. So you want a standardized record. You want the information to be accessible. You want it to be portable. You want it to be interoperable, so that when that player moves to abroad, GP, retires, goes to accident and emergency care, they can actually see what's going on, so they can make fully informed decisions. You want it to be used in medicals, so it makes life easier for the clinician to make fully informed decisions, for the clubs to actually do a proper risk assessment. You want it to be used in retirement, so that player has better health and welfare moving forwards. So that was the A to A&E approach, which led to us creating AB3. So that was all related to things which it's not rocket science. This is basics again, that a player has the right to do a lot of those things, and you are empowering that player to have better care, and that moves on to the data rights, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, a player's medical record or any athlete's medical record is theirs. It's a special category of data, but it's it's their personal data, so they're in control of it. And I mean, the interesting thing about the whole Barnsley case was that there was essentially a warranty given by Barnsley that they had either provided or would procure the consent of the player to provide all relevant medical data which would have any impact on or potential impact on the player's ability to play for Hull. They did not do that, and there was a accompanying indemnity which was badly given, I suppose, badly advised on their part, well obtained by Hull, you would say, but an indemnity which kind of covered that breach of warranty and covered it spectacularly. I mean, what occurs to me is that there seems to be potential for gaps here, like the phrase falling between two stools keeps occurring to me, because you've got not only the situation where a player transfers from club to club and there's a need to transfer medical data, but you've got players who might be going off to play for their countries, where you're getting a different set of carers, a different set of health provision. So there's been another prominent case, was a case involving Tottenham Hotspur and a youth player, a tragic case where he'd been for a screening with the FA, and that revealed an underlying heart condition. That was referred back to the Tottenham medical staff, and for whatever reason was not either forcibly put upon the Tottenham staff, or the Tottenham staff didn't act upon it. Both ended up blaming each other, and the player was successful, the player's family was successful in getting full recovery of damages, and it was awarded 70% for the FA's cardiologist and 30% for the Spurs medical team. So that is an example there of kind of the gaps that can occur. I think back briefly to the McDonald case, there was, as I understand, I mean, a lot of these transfers happen very quickly. Time is of the essence, and this indeed was a deadline day transfer. So I understand from the written reasons the club doctor didn't even know about the transfer. The physio did, and the physio transferred some of the stuff, not all of the stuff, and that's where the holes started to appear. I think in terms of a data perspective, I mean, this app, this is clearly on FIFPro's radar, because they released the Charter of Player Data Rights in 2022, which is a document which essentially is built on all the principles from the leading legislation in the latest data protection statutes, so the Data Protection Act in the UK, for instance. So that brings it up to speed, and there's essentially 8 or 9 principles in that document which they want to bring out and empower the player, and 2 of the big ones are portability of information, and again, this is what this app does, because it's all in one place, it's readily available. The speed with which a player can access, I think if any of us in the UK requests our NHS records, there's going to be a 3 or 4 week wait, but this way it's quicker, and it's just the accessibility and the kind of player-focused methodology, and that's where, and it is compliant with that legislation. So to me it plugs several potential holes in what is a sort of complex set of data transfer situations.
Yeah, I presume kind of there's a massive financial impact on clubs as well, but it's not just that, it's more the reputation side of it as well. I'm sure in your experience you've seen it, it can have a massive impact on the reputation if it's in the press.
Yeah.
And just all over social media.
Well, as I said earlier, I mean, no one really wants to be involved in litigation. Yeah. I mean, Hull celebrated this litigation publicly, but I mean, the truth is there's very rarely proper winners in disputes like that. It hoovers up management time, it's expensive, it's risky, it's stressful, it's something probably not to be involved with. One of the reasons, if you can avoid it, one of the other reasons given by the panel for publishing this, there's a couple of reasons actually, both very relevant, but the reasons why they were published, these written reasons were, one, that it had applicability to all the other clubs, so this was like a warning to other clubs about giving medical disclosure warranties. They had to be they had to have it on their radar. But one of the other reasons they said was that there was a lot of adverse media as against Hull City, because there was various accusations being levelled at Hull as to why they were defending this claim. This is a player who, it's in the public domain, eventually got cancer and a serious form of cancer, and had to have pretty high levels, pretty serious surgery. So this was, there was a story in that in the press that Hull wanted to correct, and that's why they were keen for those written reasons to be out there, and for everyone to know better, and therefore, yeah, as you say, managing better the kind of public perception.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of a lot of the issues that athletes deal with, they're emergency situations, aren't they? So a player could have a serious problem on the pitch, collapse, and that's it. And say, for example, if they're not on the pitch and they're just out living their day-to-day life in the public, shopping, whatever, they arrive at A&E, none of their information is available for that A&E nurse or doctor to be able to give them the proper care. So could you just kind of touch upon that a little bit?
Yeah, so Alistair mentioned a cardiac case involving Tottenham Hotspur. Every athlete in the UK in professional football will have cardiac screening, and which is very good. That's obviously great that we regularly have a protocol we follow and do regular cardiac screening, whether it's ECGs or ultrasounds of the heart or family history and things. And a real life case for me is one of our younger players has got a family history of his dad dying suddenly from cardiac death, and he went through NHS of having family inherited cardiac disease clinic tests, scans, blood tests, all of this, and he always got encouraged to give that to club doctors wherever he was. That did get passed on through paper to me, or the version of me. I then, when he's involved in professional sport, we're doing regular screening and tests. We then take that information, give that back to the NHS care. So it's a good way of good combined management, but that is us putting the information via paper or email or whatever it is back. What should be is the player holds that, and that player gives that. So when he, God forbid, goes to A&E, and if there was anything like a collapse, then him or his family member can actually just go, there you go.
Yeah.
It empowers him to show all that information, instead of that doctor in A&E now needing to do blood tests, heart scans. He's had a heart scan 2 weeks ago, I can see it. He's had blood tests 2 months ago, I can see it. So if you have that information to hand, you can treat that person with speed for the right care. So that's one example of hundreds of examples, whether it's an asthma attack or a collapse or an epileptic fit or appendicitis or anything. So I think that's the information of going to the emergency department, but equally that emergency doctor needs to put that information somewhere so that we then get fed back the right information as well. Yeah. And currently, we might get a letter, and other times you do not get a letter, and that leads on to kind of the different sectors. So if you're waiting 1 day, 1 week, 2 weeks to get a letter back, and you're hearing the player's account of that, it's not great. You want to know all the facts immediately. So with the app, as we'll probably have a look, is you can actually instantly give that handover back.
It just wastes a lot of valuable time for the nurses and doctors in the hospital, which could be just used to actually treat them properly.
So it's time, it's money, it's manpower, it's all the things which Alistair's touched on as well. We're working at speed in sport, and you want results. It's all about performance, results, and that goes back to player availability. Do the basics right. Yeah,
it's not just when the athlete is playing the sport. It's, for example, if it was a rugby player, cricket player, footballer, after their career and they've retired, say, for example, then they go into A&E, much later in life, where are those bits of information kept? And the problem isn't just when they're playing, it's retirement as well, isn't it? That's something you've dealt with,
And I think it's not, as I created this, you're living, breathing it every day as a doctor in sport, but it's not football, it's not rugby, it is any sport. But actually, it's not any sport, it's private care.
Yeah.
So whether it's an entertainment industry or whether it's the aviation industry or a big business corporation, they are seeing private doctors, which is completely separate to their normal care. So it has to be amalgamated somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of from the medical side of it, so I think in one of the videos, it was one of the gentlemen, he said that you wouldn't buy a second-hand car. You just wouldn't do it, and that had a lot of problems. And I think you can apply that directly to the sporting arena. You know, if you don't know someone's medical history and you're taking them on and offering them a really good contract, you actually don't know what you're getting, do you? So, like, from a legal perspective, what would you touch on that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it's a buyer needs to have full disclosure of a player's. You know, it'll be a very high value transaction, so they need to be fully informed about what the player's medical condition says. You know, it's fairly obvious, I suppose, but equally for the selling club, you know, in the Barnsley case, they needed to know what they had to disclose, and I think if information's all in one place, then that risk or that kind of grey area, and the unknown is mitigated and is better controlled. I think it again would have helped both buying club and selling club in that situation.
Yeah, no, 100%. So we're just going to show you a quick video of the kind of tools that AB3 can offer to athletes and the clinicians.
I think it's got a really simple user interface. I think it can be used by anybody.
The app splits everything into body parts, so it's very clear for the player to know where they can find things, whether that's medical letters, medical screening, blood test results, and so on.
Certain sports don't have the luxury of having regular doctors all the time. So to have the ability to pass on good quality notes straight away, whether that be by dictation or a form, and pass it on to the main team. And you can also cover yourself and be clear about what you've done, whether that's suturing, concussion checks, dislocations, things like that.
So for example, that A&E consultant who sees the player who's got a broken leg can input directly onto the app, and that can be available on the dashboard for me straight away, and that's something that's unique.
If it goes through a third party in the player, the explanation might not necessarily be correct when it gets back, or with how busy the doctors and independent physios are, you might be waiting sort of 10 to 14 days for any response to it.
It's got lots of functions that make inputting things easier, voice notes, photos of letters, PDFs, etc.
It's good information to have, and I think the future generations of players probably will take more of an interest in their own bodies.
Players, like everybody else, will just Google everything, and they might find 100 different opinions which tell them 100 different things to do, and they get worried. More so than just being worried, they might start doing things that are not appropriate. One of the things that the app does to mitigate this is it has resource section that you can tailor.
Like recovery, aid and nutrition, you know, the mental health section, which is massive, and it's a massive part of, you know, the game and what players need, especially going through injuries. So I trust everything within this product that can benefit me moving forward in the future. AB3 empowers the athlete, merges the record,
and revolutionises care in sports.
So just a quick overview of the kind of tools and resources sections that we have in the AB3 app. Just in the last minute or so, do you want to just quickly touch upon how you find using the app and the benefits that players get from using those tools and resources section?
Yeah, so it's all about empowering the person whose record it is. They have, by empowering them, that will educate them. They will understand their medical problems better. If they've got resource sections on there, you've got reputable resources, whether it's nutrition, recovery. All of a sudden, you've got things on there where that athlete can use it not only for their medical record, it's also an athlete hub. By having that, not only the athlete wins, the club wins. Not only the club wins, the governing body wins. It's for all stakeholders, because we've both said it repeatedly, and it's time, it's money, it's manpower, it's things which clubs, players, you don't want to be doing. You need to be focused so that the performance is right, so you get the right results on the pitch.
Yeah, oh, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the only thing I would add is something we mentioned about the retirement piece, where you know, in rugby we're going to have huge class actions going through the English courts as against the rugby's governing bodies, I think what this passport does in terms of continuing that care from a player's career into retirement, I think that can only help, because it will provide a document of stuff that wouldn't be on the NHS record. So things like injections, or whether players had time off for concussion, or any kind of on-pitch treatment, which might not necessarily be there for an NHS record, would be there for a sports record, and then would show up clearly in whichever doctor inherits that player post-career, and that is a key feature that would, again, it's a contemporaneous record of recording those symptoms, whether it's dementia or anything like that. Then you can track it from an earlier stage. I think a lot of these players who are involved in the group class action of having symptoms develop later on in life, but I think the earlier you have that information available, the better the healthcare, and hopefully improves or at least streamlines the litigation if there's a claim to be made.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully this can improve, healthcare in sports in the future as well. Well, thank you both very much for speaking here today, and thank you to our audience. Really appreciate it. Have a lovely day.